Some great films there. Thanks everyone for coming today and braving the January cold on a Saturday afternoon. My name's Raphael Matunga. I'm the editor of short form at Channel 4, and beside me I have the two teams who made those wonderful shorts that you saw that have been made for a strand called Random Acts that I helped run. And you're all from non-traditional filmmaking backgrounds, that's right. Fair to say.
Yep.
Yeah. So we've got Ballet Boys team here who made that dance short clinic, which was shot in Ethiopia, I think. So Kerry Whelan over here, who your title is, I've got it down as Executive Director of Ballet Boys, which sounds very grand.
Of the company.
I'm
the producer, basically. So.
He's the man who knows everything's happening. And we have Michael Nunn, who was one of the founders of Ballet Boys, who are a dance company, and we'll talk about everything that you've done soon enough. We've got Ed Bradbury to my right, also known as Kid Acne, who is the brainchild behind Zebraface.
Well, one of them, Will, as well. He's over there. He's a
right.
writer.
Sorry, Will. Stole your thunder there.
Sorry, yeah.
Apologies. And then we've also got Paul Reardon, who directed those two.
Yeah.
Yes.
And co-directed with Ed.
Co-directed with Ed. God, these creatives,
So Paul's the
Please,
co-director, and the animators are here as well, Chris and Jason and their team from Wild Stallion. So it's a.
So we've got Zebraface Ghetto here.
Yeah.
He's gone.
We're the two kind of representing half a dozen or so people, and Jude is the online producer
Fantastic.
as well. So there's about 8 of us. So.
I mean, I can definitely speak from my experience. I mean, I commissioned both filmmakers and people who've never made films before, or kind of made their kind of cut their teeth in different creative trades. And you couldn't quite get stuff like that unless you'd done other things beforehand, I think. So, before we start discussing breaking the mould, etc., I just wanted to ask the audience, how many of you would kind of consider yourselves actual filmmakers, or would kind of class yourself as filmmakers? Okay, all right. And how many would classify themselves as kind of creatives, so from any kind of creative walk of life?
Can you see how many people are actually putting their hands up?
I can guesstimate how many would say that. I'd say about 10 people out of an audience of 40. A quarter.
Just for that podcast.
Right, for the podcast. Putting their hand up. And how many are you just kind of interested in films and filmmaking and kind of are viewers? That should be everyone, right? Yeah, okay. Cool, all right. Well, that's good to know. I guess, I wanted to start off by talking about your creative first loves then, if you didn't get into bed with filmmaking to start with. So I guess, Kerry, do you want to go through kind of what it was you kind of creatively first got involved with? I think it was theatre, wasn't it, to begin with?
That's right, yeah.
That you were into. Do you want to kind of talk a bit about what were you doing before you kind of got into this nonsense that is filmmaking?
Well, I got into this nonsense through Ballet Boys. So before I joined Ballet Boys 7 years ago, I had no experience or any previous contact with filmmaking at all. I was a theatre producer and venue manager, so and I still am in terms of the live stage company that we have. But yeah, so really, I learned everything as I went along. In fact, we sort of learned together as we went along together, really. So.
And Michael, you were a trained ballet dancer, of course.
I was a dancer at the Royal Ballet for about 10 years in Covent Gardens around the corner, and the last couple of years decided to make a film with my business partner William Trevitt about our lives there, and we bought a camera in Tottenham Court Road, and we worked out how to switch it on, and we just recorded everything we did for a year, and we managed to get an appointment at Channel 4. I can't even remember how, and we went into the commissioning editor, and she went out to get us a cup of tea. They probably don't do that anymore, do they?
No, you have to make your own now.
And for some reason we stuck headshots of ourselves. Someone had said, you've got to remind yourself. So we stuck headshots of ourselves all over her room.
Don't do this if you ever come to
And she obviously hadn't seen the tapes we'd sent in, but we just left the 2 VHS tapes there, and she watched them and called us up, and then we made a 4-part series, and that was it. And then it just sort of went from there.
Amazing. So, I mean, was film something that you'd always considered in the background when you were kind
always,
of training
from the age of 16, just realised that you were around sort of beauty all the time, working in the arts, and just wanting to keep that. And so my business partner and I, at the age of 16, we bought a camera together, a medium format camera, and started taking stills. And then that just developed into a love of technology and film and video. And I think when we first made it, you were allowed 5% on amateur equipment, right. And ours was sort of 100% then, and it was a proper sort of video diary. And then things just got harder from then on.
Yes, so from that point on, you thought you'd got your first gig, and you could continue to make stuff, and you continued to do that for Channel 4. Do you want to talk a bit about Kerry and Kerry as well, what we kind of done for
our
Channel 4
relationship with Channel 4 was I suppose it was in those sort of maverick days, 12, 14 years ago, whenever it was, and where they just listened to an idea and just let you go and make it. And
we still like to think we do that. But
we made a film called Strictly Bolshoy, and it was about we found out this guy was going off to Moscow to make a ballet, a big ballet for the Bolshoy, and he was the first ever Englishman to be invited in there, and he was going in a month's time. So we called Channel 4 and said we can have a meeting. We came and said, this is happening, can we do it? And they said, what's it going to cost? And we're like, it's about £500,000 And we're like, oh, make sure you get something on paper. And that was it. And they went for the idea, and we went and we made the film, and it was successful, you know, and they won an Emmy for it, and it was all good. And I think from then on we just sort of go and sound people out if they like the idea, because they're all events that are happening, so it's not something we can dream up and say we'll do it in a year's time. It's always we hear something's happening, it might be something in Cuba, so this is happening next month, do you want it or not? And then it's either a yes or a no.
And safe to say no one else could really make those kind of films apart from people from your background.
Absolutely, because I think that the relationship we have with the artists we work with, we know their trade intimately, and we're not just a documentary crew that don't know anything, you know. And the Bolshoy film ended up that the choreographer that was making the piece fell out with all the dancers, and they wouldn't work for him. So midway through the process of recording it, we had to put the cameras down, put our tights back on, help him create the work, then pick the cameras back up. So that was integral to the story. So we mainly make, you know, those sort of arts programs about dance, about opera. I think it's the same way as if you've got someone interviewing another artist. If you've been in that same profession, it's much, much easier. You know, we often get interviewed by people, and the first question is saying, how did you get into this sport? And you're like, fuck, I don't want to speak to you already. It's not, dancing isn't a sport, or I don't see it as a sport. So they're the
I always thought it was a sport. So from, you know, beautiful dance to I mean, Ed, what do we call what you do? Kind of urban culture in a way. I mean, did you start off as a
I didn't grow up in a city, so I mean, it started more rural culture really when we were younger.
Wikipedia says you were born in Malawi, by the way.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Wikipedia telling me that. I've got interesting facts about all these guys that I'm going to throw in.
Yeah, that's true. But I grew up in the East Midlands, and with my brother and Will, who wrote Zebraface, when we were teenagers, we got into making fanzines. I got into painting graffiti. Everyone got into forming bands, you know, sort of punk bands, DIY, sort of noise bands and everything.
So you're part of a scene, really, when that...
Well, we sort of made something happen, I suppose, out of boredom. Where we grew up was similar to the town in Dead Man's Shoes, that sort of type environment, I suppose. And through making music, then we'd go to charity shops and car boot stores, buying old records to sample breaks or whatever, and then find Super 8 cameras. We started making our own edited in camera Super 8 films and making music to accompany them, and that's sort of there's always something creative behind what we did, whether it was sort of fanzines or paintings or film or music or whatever. And then this stuff came from a comic strip that was in one of those fanzines, and we always wanted to do that as an animation, but never really knew how to do that. And then that's when I teamed up with Paul and asked for his help, really, because he was keen to sort of get into animation and filmmaking as well. We know each other through graphic design and illustration, kind of working together for what, 10 years? Or
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
so then the team expanded, and then so we was looking for an animator, and then Chris and Jason were recommended to us through other mutual friends, and then it just sort of evolved. So
in a weird way, history was repeating itself, because you had the synthesis of creatives who all came from different backgrounds to kind of pool their resources to make something new in a way.
I mean, even in making music, I've never learned how to play an instrument, but I've made 3 albums. One of them was signed to EMI, and but I always sort of teamed up with someone else who knew how to do it. That's kind of how I approach stuff, which is probably I don't know if that's right or wrong, but you know, I team up with somebody who knows what they're doing, and sort of like piggyback on that, and then try and sort of put my ideas forward. And I suppose that's what happened with this. We knew we wanted to make a cartoon. We kind of knew who we wanted to do the voices. We knew how we wanted to look, but we just didn't have the skills or the means to do that. So it's a case of putting a team together, and then that's what we've been doing for the last year, is like figuring it out. These are the first 2 examples. It's part of a bigger body of work, and
this is the first time they've been screened.
The first time they've been screened in London. Yeah.
So consider yourselves lucky. Start of a movement.
Yeah, that's it.
It's the first time I've actually seen him on a cinema screen.
Oh yes,
I missed the screening last year in Sheffield, so it's good to see him.
Yeah.
So Paul, moving on to you, Paul. So what's your background? How did you start? You know, what was your creative first love?
Well, animation really. I mean, I kind of always wanted to be like Chris and Jason, and I did when I was at college. We had a fairly kind of open course, so we could study all different. It was a communications course. It wasn't a specific discipline, and I did a placement with a really talented puppet animator, a guy called Barry Purvis, who has been commissioned a few times, I think, for Channel 4. And I did a placement there and learned like so much in those 2 weeks about narrative and storytelling and timing of things, and just really kind of in awe of it, really. And for some reason I didn't quite go down that path. I ended up getting a job as a graphic designer when I left college, and met the first job I met my kind of future business partner, Peter, and we worked together in various agencies, and then eventually started up our own business. And it was through Peter, I think, I met Ed, wasn't it? Cause,
we knew each other through music.
Right.
DJ as well.
And Sheffield's like that anyway. It's a fairly kind of close. If you're in some kind of creative discipline, chances are you're bound to bump into.
And there's a lot of cross-pollination as a result of that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I suppose it's always kind of percolated at the back of my mind, and through the business I moved into creative direction, and directed a lot of photography, but never moving image, and it's always something I've wanted to kind of step into. And I think I read the book about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe, something like that, the collected edition of Zebraface Stories, and I remember reading it for the first time and going, this is absolutely mental. And I just really loved it. So Ed mentioned a few times that he wanted to kind of make it into animation, and his show, I think, was the thing that kicked it off, really, because you wanted to kind of look into doing it for that, didn't you?
Yeah, I got to do a retrospective of my artwork at the museum in Sheffield. Was it last year or the year before? Year before last. And that was the first time that I'd looked back at all this work that I'd done from, you know, being a teenager to present day. And yeah, Zebraface was one of those things that had just lay dormant for ages, and we were like, we really need to do something with this. The original idea was to do like a short 1-minute animation to be part of the exhibition, and everyone quite quickly said, do you realise how much work that is? That's going to be more than the whole exhibition put together. So we did the exhibition, which Paul helped me curate and design, because, you know, I had to sort of select all this work, and then the next thing was to work on the animation after that. So yeah, it's been about 18 months, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah.
So far, it's still going.
Yeah, it's still going, ongoing. Yeah, evolving.
We're nearly there.
Amazing. So Kerry and Michael, we've obviously heard a bit about your backgrounds, but do you want to tell us a bit about how the clinic came about, and also about the other random acts that you've done, and how that's been as a process, and how, you know, your different creative backgrounds have kind of fed into those?
Yeah, I mean, the clinic came about because we were in Ethiopia, and we got to Ethiopia because we wanted to make a documentary about the young dancers we were working with at the time, and we wanted them to have a joint experience. And the original plan, we were going to take them all to LA, and we were going to do a show in Vegas or something, and then fly home again.
Sounds like a nice holiday.
But we couldn't get the budget off Channel 4 for that. So
always blame Channel 4.
we found out that there was a small dance company in Addis Ababa, the only dance company in Ethiopia, and it was run by these two guys who were fairly similar to Billy and I, and they'd started it all, and they've got 8 dancers there, but they had barely any money or any exposure and not supported at all. So I asked Kerry to book us a trip to Ethiopia, 14 of us, to put on a theatre performance there.
We had about 6 weeks, I think, to organise the whole lot in order to get out there for the time that we had to do it in, and a very limited budget because it was based on a more for licence fee rather than a full Channel 4 commission. So, but we're used to, as a theatre company and dance company, we're used to working on very small.
That's megabucks,
so,
right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where the sort of the crossover comes actually in terms of being a very small team and often working on very small budgets. We're able to be quite inventive and
so hence we rented this ex-cholera clinic to keep all the dancers in.
It was a guest house. It wasn't actually a cholera.
It wasn't quarantined.
So we could take the whole thing and the kitchen and everything. So we were sort of self-sufficient behind the gates. And during the time we were there for about a month, weren't we?
Yeah, three weeks. Yeah.
It was just such beautiful light up and down that corridor between all the rooms. And one of the guys said he'd be really interested in creating a work using that space. And we had the Steadicam there and we had all the kit. So we thought, right, well, there's got one day off. You want to work on your day off, create a piece of work that goes up and down this corridor with a narrative, and we'll shoot it for you. So really, we just sort of directed and shot it, and the boys created the work, and then a sound artist, Mukul, created the score once we got home, and that's really how the film came about. So it was all done in one day, and the costumes were all made up at the local market.
Amazing.
So it was. Yeah.
Quite interesting. And so Ballet Boys are doing they've done 25 films.
Curating as well.
Curating and commissioning and kind of directing. They've done 25 films, 3-minute films for us already, and they're doing
another 20.
Doing 20. They don't know what they've let themselves in for.
Before October.
And so tell me, I mean, what's the main difference between, wide-eyed young Michael with his first camera now and the kind of, I guess, in that cyclic way, people who are kind of in that position now who are a bit younger? What's the main difference creatively you've found?
Well, the main difference obviously is when you're commissioning these random acts, people have such fantastic ideas, and you'll get them into the office and they'll talk it through and they want to use this composer and this set, and all of a sudden, just choosing that composer, you can't show it, there's no money for it, and people have to start then being more creative with it. It's really, random acts is a lot about finding raw talent and hand-holding them through it. But hopefully what we're going to try and do this time is revisit those people so they can give them a little more space to do it themselves.
A lot of it's the hand-holding, a lot of the technical side of it was the bit that I think we found to begin with. So there's a lot of delivery formats.
Even the experienced filmmakers, you'll be surprised, turn up and they're credits will be in the wrong format or on the wrong side of the bloody screen, or the sound's wrong.
What's the kind of, as a rough percentage, what's the balance of people who have been formally trained in filmmaking and people who've never made a film before but are kind of technically gifted elsewhere creatively?
We probably had 2/3 were the gifted amateurs and about 1/3 of the ones, I think, other than the ones we made, and I don't know whether you'd say we're trained or not.
Fairly amateur.
But even the sort of trained and experienced and have done lots of other stuff, as I say, in fact they were probably the worst in terms of the delivery.
Also, because it's dance, we're very much commissioned to make some form of dance element within our films. You give it to a director that's made tons of stuff, fantastic ideas, gets a brilliant team on board, spends 50 grand instead of 5, whatever it is, and there's no dance in it.
Yeah,
that does become an issue. Quite a lot in a lot of these films. You have to pull it all back in again and say, this is what this film's about. It's not an advert for your next feature, which some of these can turn into. Yes. You know what it's like.
Yeah. I mean, from a Channel 4 point of view, it's absolutely exciting to kind of involve people who absolutely aren't of that mould in a way, and it's that point of difference that's exciting, and those seeds that lead to, you know, longer form shows in a way. So, I mean, going back to your early Sheffield days, you know, you're going out raving and you're coming back and you're making your great music and that kind of stuff. What's the main difference between the filmmakers you meet now, who might have been in your position then, and what you guys were doing then? Is it kind of more creative, or is it less? Or
I don't know. I mean, anyone that, I don't know about Paul, but for me, anyone I come into contact with through filmmaking or whatever is generally from similar background to me, which would be someone who's not from a filmmaking background. Through that album I did with EMI, that was probably the worst experience in making really expensive but shit pop promos, which I had to do a couple of times, and that really was difficult, because it's sort of spending a lot of money on something that you feel that you and your friends could make for, you know, a small percentage of that. But at the same time, the record company needs to justify spending that much money with a professional, you know, skilled professional. So that, for me, that was a real battle. But actually, through making maybe half a dozen promos, I think we ended up with a sort of quite an even balance in the end. Once we understood the formula to it, there was a couple that we did through Warp Films with a friend of Shane Meadows, Paul Fraser, that were really good, and then a couple of we did ourselves, and we just sort of which Jude also produced, and it was just pulling favours in really to try and sort of make something for £5 but look like it was 50 grand, rather than making something for 50 grand that looked like it was £5 if you so
which can happen,
which can do. I mean, it's a bit of the lap of the gods really when you're filming a promo. It's just down to what happens that day or that weekend, and sometimes you can rescue it in the edit, sometimes you can't, but I think we had enough kind of good and bad experiences to really it made us learn on our feet a bit more. And I think going into this project, that's what we've tried to do, is to just sort of learn from the mistakes we're making as we're making them, rather than repeating those mistakes. And I think that it's happening now, that we're all kind of getting to grips with what it is and how we want it to look. And that was the biggest problem in the beginning, I think, for all of us. None of us knew what it was going to look or sound like. We had a sort of a storyboard and a script, but we're all imagining completely different things, and it's not until you see something or hear something that you can take a call on it that it's not actually how you want it to be, because on paper it sounds great, but in reality it perhaps doesn't translate well. So that's something that's been a kind of a joint effort really, that we've all sort of gone, I think this would work better if we did this. So the best ideas are moving forward no matter what, and that's where we just have to kind of you have to put your egos to one side really, and just go, you're right, that is better. And I think hopefully we're making good films out of it, and all that experience from the past is helping us sort of form those decisions. But certainly other younger filmmakers that I know, exactly the same as us, they just come from non-filmmaking backgrounds, that their mates make music.
Don't you find it? I think it's much easier now for young filmmakers to make work, because when we started making it, it was all about union and all about having a huge team, and you couldn't do that because you can't speak to him. I have to speak to you first to pick that pencil up, and it used to drive us insane. I think it's sort of, it still happens a bit on the big drama. We've worked on a few big dramas where we just do small parts of it, and it's still, you go speak to the director. You can't speak to, you've got to speak to the assistant director. Who then I understand that, because you're moving this multi-million-pound machine, it has to keep going. But that sort of thing in the documentary world is sort of gone now.
So you think cheaper equipment and the ability to be able to edit stuff yourself, or animate indeed in After Effects or something like that, it's kind of,
I think we were fairly successful at the beginning because we could undercut the rest of the market, not deliberately, because we couldn't understand why it cost all that money. We want to make a film in Russia and this is what it costs, and people say, you can't do it, where are your two sound guys and your gaffer, and you think, well, no, it's not that sort of film. We record the sound, we shoot it, we write the script, we cut it, we deliver it. That's how we want to do it, not because we want to cream off a load of cash. I think that happens more and more, and people shouldn't be afraid of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like now you can be equally as inventive as to how you make a film rather than just the actual idea of the concept itself, really, because there's not necessarily a lot of money flying around now to make films either. But cheaper equipment. I mean, certainly in music, when you're making music promos, I mean, there's a few bands that I'm working with at the moment, and some of them are unsigned as well, so there's no budget there at all. So the idea of even getting a cameraman, it's like one of the ideas that we had for one of the videos actually just revolved around doing everything on a photocopier, and those are the frames, so we don't even need a camera. So there's kind of lots of ways to kind of go around it, but sometimes you do find yourself having to be inventive about how you do it as well.
I think the hardest thing is just managing the time. That's the difficult thing. If you've got a creative group of friends, you can all make something that's going to look pretty good. But it's just how you manage everyone's schedules to do that, because everyone gets busier and has got other commitments. Whereas when we were teenagers, it's like we're all free at the weekend, so we could all just go out and film stuff.
So the more work you're getting is great, but it means the less opportunity you have to kind of pull your resources.
Yeah, it's hard to sort of prioritise it, I suppose. But there's no shortage of ideas or potential films to be made. It's just sort of how you manage your time to be able to actually make them. I mean, going back to some of the music promos we did, that we did them for literally nothing, but it took us 6 months to make, so we had to just fit them in between other stuff, and that's where it was a bit of a learning experience. Like, that's where the money does come in handy, because you can say, right, we are doing it next weekend, and that's the deadline, and then people can put it first. So it's a bit of a balancing act now. I think it's like you need something to sort of help get it off the ground, but that's not necessarily the creative content. It's just the kind of practical side of things.
And that's an interesting point. I mean, you're breaking the mould creatively, but is there the money to kind of support that at the moment, do you think? Is it easy, even if you've got a different aesthetic, for people to take a punt on you? Or is it kind of almost harder than it was when you were starting out, because there's...
I think it doesn't change. It's still as difficult to get a film commissioned now as it was then. I certainly couldn't survive on just making stuff for television. Our day job is working in the theatre and putting on performances, and making television and film is just icing on the cake, really.
Is that your experience as well at the moment?
I don't know, this is our first ones we've done for Channel 4, so...
Hint, hint.
Yeah. No idea.
I mean, before we go on, are there any questions or anything anyone would like to quiz these guys on? Filmmaking related or non-filmmaking related? No?
How much more Zebraface is planned for Channel 4?
So at the moment we've got 5, 3 of which have come through the door. So that's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
3.
Yeah.
So once those 5 are finished, I guess we'll talk further about... Random Acts is running at least till October 2013. And sorry, I should have introduced Random Acts, really. It's a weeknightly strand on Channel 4. They're 3-minute kind of interventions into the schedule between 11 p.m. and 12 p.m. And they're there for the sole purpose of almost being anti-TV. They're from, they're arts in the widest possible sense. So Zebraface sits into that, and they don't follow, on a weekly basis. They kind of come as and when. So yeah, I mean, absolutely would love to do more, but it depends on what the ideas are, and also kind of your schedules and things like that.
Yeah.
And whether the strand goes on. So that's a hint to my boss, who's not even here.
So maybe more.
But should we listen to the podcast, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Right, you should.
Yeah, absolutely. But hopefully, I feel like what I feel might have changed, and I don't know whether you feel that, is that there are more avenues to kind of put your creative work out there. So whereas television was, one of the major avenues for new creative talent, especially who went from a filmmaking background, now you've got things like Vimeo, now you've got different kinds of film festivals. Are you finding kind of people who had never seen your work before or wouldn't have thought about it 10 years ago are now seeing it through these different mediums and from all over the world as well, rather than just internationally.
I mean, the internet's changed a lot. I mean, I come from a graffiti background, so when I first used to paint graffiti, you'd have to go to that wall, take a photo of it yourself, and people might send photos to each other. But now, I'd say like 99% of people see that painting through the internet online. You know, there's still a core group of people who will go to that city and take a photo of it themselves, but generally, yeah, you can paint something in any part of the world and it's online that day, and then your audience sees it. So I guess it's the same with the films as well, you know, and the music that we've done, that once it's online, viral, you know, it does go all over the place, and that is a real kind of liberating feeling, I suppose, that these sort of labours of love that you make, and then you can put them out there and share it and start seeing the viewing figures going up and up and up, and that's really nice feeling. And the same with the screen. We did a public screening in Sheffield last year, and that was really well attended. There was like a few hundred people there for that, so that was nice to sort of think that people are interested in what you're doing, because you spend ages doing this thing. It's like,
yes,
you know,
locked away
an
in a
empty
box.
room.
Yeah. Well, you've got a full house today as well.
Yeah. So, yeah.
How about you guys? You were saying earlier that, you know, you've got people from the States viewing.
Yeah, we get a lot of viewing online, but I think it is a bit of a double-edged sword. There are loads of avenues now to put your work out there and for people to see it, but it sort of takes away from the major networks who have that excuse now not to put you out. You know, Channel 4, BBC won't put you out because they've got this online strand, or they've got, you know. So it's more and more difficult to get creative arts on mainstream television.
Does that mean that television is, in a way, going to become less relevant to kind of?
I think so. I think the sort of arts community has sort of given up on that anyway. You're not going to be up there against Strictly Come Dancing or Embarrassing Bodies or anything, and people are starting now really to focus on those other avenues, which so they will get better.
So you think how about you guys? Do you think telly is kind of, again, an icing on a cake thing? It's not kind of business critical for you guys to get your work shown on telly. It's a nice thing to do, but really,
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think historically, you always think of, you know, television has been a great thing to be on there because it's always been like an established platform. But I mean, I could see that changing quite a bit in the next kind of maybe 15, 20 years as more and more digital channels become focused on streamed content, say, that maybe a lot of those channels will start to become not fully scheduled, so that you know, you're actually giving the public more choice about what they want to watch within that channel, and that might change things again.
We did a program in America last year, and the biggest viewers they had is they streamed it simultaneously to Facebook. It's the first time Facebook had ever done it. It went out exactly the same time. Far more viewers than ever watched it on the network. Yeah. So maybe that will happen. You know, you build up your followers on those social networks, and you just go to that network then for all your content. Yeah. You know.
Interesting. Okay. So, what next? I suppose in terms of moving image, if we're going to stick to that rather than all the different parts of your work, would you be planning on? Is it more zebra face or?
Yeah, that's what we'd like to do. Is for us, I guess this is sort of like a pilot series, and we'd like to make that into a full series, or, you know, more. There's a lot of stories waiting to, you know, be turned into animations, and there's a lot of voiceover artists that we'd like to work with. So, I mean, I'd certainly be keen to see that as a bigger body of work.
Because you've experimented with other types of moving image as well, haven't you? You've done some. You were saying earlier you've done a few DIY films.
Yeah, we've done like bits of stop frame animation and a couple of short films. I've done another film project that's like in my like art exhibitions, which is sort of a different thing. But yeah, the zebra face thing is really great because it goes back to that original style of drawing which I first did as a teenager, and it's bringing it to life with a narrative and with musicians doing the voices. So it's like, for me, it's like an all-encompassing project. So that's why I'd be most keen to sort of see that through to a more kind of more of a conclusion, I suppose. Whereas if it's just a small set of films and then that's that one project done and then I'm on to something else, I think that would be a shame really, because I think it's got more potential than that. You know, I could see it there being like 10, 15, 20 or more, you know, films, and they could get longer in length, and there's a lot of other characters and character arcs that we bring into it, because we're random acts, it's limited to 3 minutes, so a lot of the stories are up to chop down just to get it within the 3 minute, whereas if they were like 6 minutes or 8 minutes, for example, there might be sort of like subplots and other things coming in as well. So I think there's a lot of mileage in that, and I'd rather stick with that than trying to do another 5 animations of something else completely different. I think we've established a universe now, and we're starting to get our heads around it as well. So it'd be nice.
And as a team, I guess creatively, you're kind of synthesising together.
It's taken a while to sort of understand how certain characters move, and I mean, even like with the dinosaur, she didn't used to have a tongue in the comic strip, but with the way that she lisps, it was like that was like a little intervention. There's a few little things like that they're so incidental, but you realise that they help create those characters' personalities, and it'd be nice if she appeared again in another episode rather than that's it for her, if you see what I mean.
And are you still doing the original comic, or is that kind of left to bed and you've done your...
That was kind of left to bed. It started as a fanzine. We ran a few editions of that, and then we made a book. That was like a 5-year project in itself, and then it lay dormant for a while, and then we picked it up now with the animation. So we're using the book as a starting point, but there's other stories that come from there that I doubt I'd draw them as a comic strip and then animate them. We'd just go straight to animating them now. It seems to make sense. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously because neither of us are from filmmaking backgrounds, we have had to kind of learn things on our feet a little bit, and luckily Jason and Chris are quite patient people. So we've kind of probably made a few mistakes, but also like learn interesting little discoveries on the way. Little ideas, and it's like the forked tongue thing with Messy Dinosaur. That really came from the day when we were recording the audio, and the characters played by Roz, who plays Smith in Mrs. England, and we got her because of her voice, because we really liked her voice. And when she came into the studio, she was, I don't know if she was going through like a point where she was almost being typecast for that, because she's got a very quite distinct voice, and she was like, I don't really like the sound of it. So we were saying, why don't you, because we were talking about having her with a forked tongue, why don't you go in there and do it with an overbite, because you've got like the character, as you can see, has got like a kind of a accentuated mouth. So she went in, did the whole take with an overbite, and it sounded brilliant. And just those little things that we've kind of unearthed as we've gone along, which we've not planned, they just kind of happened.
Same with the narration. Jarvis is the son. That doesn't appear in the comic book, but I think that came from you, didn't it? Saying that it would be good to have something to introduce it.
As a narrative device.
And that was something.
Thanks for that direction.
Cheers.
That's good.
Never would have thought of that. Would have just gone straight
Never
into
got Jarvis Cocker, exactly.
And so like, who could be the in Sheffield the most omnipotent kind of being?
Got it in one.
Jarvis. So.
Well, that was completely random, wasn't it? Because basically, once he said that, we obviously pestered him to get him to do it, and he can be quite aloof.
Do you think someone like Jarvis would have been more interested because you'd come from kind of different creative backgrounds and you're a bit more of a kind of band of merry men, as opposed to a slick production company you'd made?
I think so, yeah. And he's always kind of, because both of us kind of know him, relatively speaking, and he knew of the comic books, so he'd read the story, and but it's quite hard to get contact with. It's quite hard to track down. So we tried, and then we kind of gave up on it. And he bumped into Parrott, who was the guy who's Richard Barrett is his official name, who did all the sound effects for the cartoons, and he just mentioned that he was working on it, and then Jarvis went, "Oh yeah, I think I'm meant to be doing that." So once we found out about it, we kind of bombarded him again, and then he just ended up doing it. In between recording his show for,
which is the key, really.
BBC. So
there you go.
That was it. Just did it in one take.
Yeah, true professional.
Yeah.
So Ballet Boys, you're a bit further down the road in terms of having made loads of stuff. You've made stuff for American networks, you said, loads of stuff for Channel 4 over the years and the BBC. So where do you see moving image fitting into your, we
want to make a feature.
Right.
That's our sort of thing we really want to do. We'll be the new boys in that field. Kerry will raise the money. We'll find a script writer. And we'll make a feature.
Okay. And so what's the attraction there for features?
I love, we've worked on a few features. So obviously you can do one now because you've seen one being made.
Exactly, yeah.
We
exec one, and then we've done elements of other features. But it's just that being in control of something. It probably won't work like that, but making documentaries where you're somewhere for 5 days and you have to create a story and find the characters, and it's 24 hours a day, and have you done it? And then getting into an edit suite for a year. I just want something structured where I can do a take, cut, next, move on. Be a disaster, I'm sure, but it's something we've wanted to do for a long time, and a bit like you guys, try and use as many contacts as we can in the industry. We've done lots of favours for big feature companies where they've asked us to come in and supervise the dance element or train someone. So now it's time to call those favours back in. Yeah.
Okay. Do you both feel not because of naivety, but because you haven't had that formal training and you haven't been told how things are meant to be, that you do feel kind of almost infectiously ready to move on to new challenges?
I think so.
Much more easily.
And always waiting to be found out.
I think everyone feels that.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
I think the biggest discovery was really realising that nobody really knows
what they're doing.
No one knows what the fuck they're doing, basically.
It's true. I mean,
it's a true story.
The more we did on a bigger scale, and sort of going in, as you say, just waiting to be discovered as the charlatans that we are. When it got to it, actually, it was just like...
You get there and you notice someone hasn't got their headphones on, or the mic's not switched on. You think, they must have meant it, because this set's like £500,000. You get to the end of a take and someone says the sound's not on. You think, probably should have said something. You don't want to be the twat, do you, that's telling everyone what to do.
But it's a nice feeling when you kind of go, oh, actually, okay, so we do know what we're doing. Even if we don't, there's still a way. A lot of it's common sense anyway. It's you can find a way to make something happen. You can find a way to do it, and as long as you've got.
I think because the field we work in is so sort of specialist and niche, being dance, that when we've worked on features or big dramas, the director goes, "Don't know what the fuck I'm doing here, mate. So I'm just going to go and have a bacon sandwich. Can you deal with that for me?" So in the end, you end up directing the cameras and working out the light and placing it all and getting the dialogue right, and they would do this and they'd wear that, and it sort of works. So that's where we cut our teeth, really.
Fantastic. Well, they all sound really exciting. I suppose filmmakers and film lovers out there, is this a kind of representative experience of what you've had, or have we kind of got it wrong, or these guys kind of extremely lucky and really it's much tougher than we're making out? Or yes, go ahead.
I think one thing I find quite interesting is I guess sort of with my work growing up over a period of technological change, is you're always being told something I taught myself how to use when I was 15 or whatever. You can't use that anymore. And when you're working at that sort of really low, where you're making small creative things, and the way even now, you can shoot something on a Super 8 camera, or still, or you can make it on a camera phone, or you can make it on some amazing but tiny sort of HD camera, or you can make it on a photocopier or whatever. And what I worry about is sort of losing that, because you're always being told you need an Alexa or whatever it happens to be at the moment. And I wonder if that's something that you particularly feel being really attached to specific ways of working.
Interesting question. What do you think, guys?
I mean, I just think I ignore all those comments off people anyway, because we've had the same when we made music, we used to record at home on a 4-track, and then we progressed onto an 8-track, and then we got to go into a friend's recording studio to mix it down, but we still mixed it down onto mini disc, which was like just pointless use of all that equipment. But that's all we knew. So we'd have a sort of like huge desk, taking a 4-track and mini disc, hand that in, and people go, you can make it sound better than that, and you should. But we just did, we didn't really care. I suppose it is that naivety or anarchic willpower or whatever. I suppose that sometimes that is what you need to do. 'Cause there's always going to be someone that tells you, "Oh, you should get this thing now. You should get that thing." But there's a lot of filmmakers, musicians, creators that they're always looking for the next like software update, and then that'll therefore make them better at what they do. But sometimes they're just not that imaginative, and you can still make use of obsolete equipment and do something good with it. I think it's as long as it sort of sounds good. That's the thing I've learned when I was doing Super 8.
The pig.
That was the first thing I sort of learned at college. I studied fine art, but they're like, it doesn't matter what it looks like, you can handle it as long as the sound is okay. So I think that for me that's the only thing really, as long as
it's the delivery guys at the network, and they look at your stuff and they just go, there's a fault there, can't put that on the high def channel now, so I want that money back because it's not.
Although we do have editorial exemption now, it's like for random acts we can deliver an SD and you can kind of shoot on 5Ds. But it is an interesting thing because there is often a kind of lure of these nice new things.
We've always bought our own kit and we keep our own kit. And people always say you should just rent the latest gear, rent that Alexa with it. But there's something about having your own kit all the time, even though it's a bit old. You just got it in the bag and you can just shoot it, and you can be very reactive and very flexible. And then just lie to the networks and say, it's all 444, it's all. Because half of them don't know the difference anyway.
So I do anyway.
Yeah. True.
It's a full-time job in itself anyway, having to learn new technology all the technology. And we get at Peter and Paul, we get quite a lot of students now that send in the CV and examples of the work and stuff, and it tends to be like specifically with moving image stuff. A lot of it is creative use of technology rather than creative ideas and finding a way to do it.
Good technicians, basically.
Yeah. And I would say always, if your idea is fantastic, it doesn't matter if it's rough around the edges. You're always going to look for that point of difference in an idea, and for anyone. So it doesn't matter what you're using in that sense.
I think if you're from an analog world as well, which probably sounds like we all are, you do try and resist against that because you've just got that tangibility of working things out in a bit more of a kind of manual way. So
interesting. Okay. Any other insights or questions or angry statements? Manifestos, anything? No? Okay, I think we kind of at the end of our time anyway. So I'd like to give a round of applause to the fantastic filmmakers who've had tonight and their fantastic work. Thanks so much for coming. Thank you. Cheers, thanks for that.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers, thank you.
Nice work.
Thank you.